one of the dynamics of dealing with father hunger is when you don't have a chance to reconcile with your dad about issues and things, because either they're so emotionally distant or unsafe, or have passed away, that it becomes difficult. And then the question becomes, how do you move on with that? One of the things you'll have to really deal with is the grief of the ideal. All of the notion that he would be there for advice, he would, threaten my first boyfriend or any man that I brought home, that he would walk me down the aisle, and all of those things. So one of the things in that context is you'll have to grieve it. And in grieving that, you'll have to come to terms with the loss of it. And you will have to grieve that like a actual death, because it is, in a sense, that death if they have passed away. But even if they haven't passed away, what I find a lot is that women will hold on to someday. And one of the things that does is it hinders the now perspective. In other words, there is opportunities sometimes that God has actually blessed you with a surrogate dynamic to feel that. And a lot of times we don't realize those people are in our lives. They may be part of our spiritual community. They may be part of our community. And we don't necessarily link up in that way, in terms of linking it that you are getting the fathering. I know for myself, I chased my dad for a relationship, and I kept having this like ideal that we're going to work it out. And I kept getting rejected by him, even when I sought to do it towards the latter part of his life. But what I realized was, and I shouldn't even say I realized, what God really showed me was there were so many men who had come through my life and played different aspects of that role. And for me, it was coming to terms that I got fathering. I didn't get it from my father. And so sometimes we have to step back and look and say, well, who actually filled that role? And once we recognize that, a part of that healing is being able to go back, at least I've seen, is being able to go back to those men who've been in our lives and honor them for the fathering that took place. And that can be in and of itself affirming for the men who do it, but also for yourself is just an acknowledgement that this wasn't like an absolute zero, that I had no fathering in my life. But it may be an uncle who paid for a prom dress. It may be a family friend who just managed to come through and be there. It may be a teacher. A lot of the teachers I had were male teachers who handled me from a father's perspective. It wasn't just your student teacher relationship. And then, like I said, when I joined the church, deep spiritual community, when I was coaching my son's football team, I tried to provide for the kids who didn't have that fathering. And there's actually a couple of them now who still will talk to me when they can't talk to their dad. So I think one of the things we have to look at is what were the surrogates, and then we have to look at salvaging. And by salvaging, I mean getting over the notion that it was ideal, or that the ideal is the only way to heal that or fix that. So as you process through that grief, it should raise the notion and awareness of some of the honor for the men who did step in and the men who did provide some of that. And you can decide to honor them. You can write them a letter saying, thank you for this specific area, if it's one area, or you could write them a letter saying, I appreciate just your overall being there. But there are different ways to fulfill that. But then, yeah, there is the hard part of just grieving it as a loss, that it is something that I will never get from him. And so from a grief perspective, I need to get over the dream of it and not be stuck in I didn't have it, but looking at ways that it got done, maybe not in the ideal, and then salvaging that. And then I would also suggest that you're honestly never too old to find surrogacy. I spent a lot of time with older couples and just going and visiting and sitting on their porch and gaining their wisdom. One of my friends, it was his grandparents. In other cases, it was the lady across the street. And that's not to say that my mom wasn't there, but I got parenting through a lot of different surrogate situations. Both of my aunts, my Aunt Marie and my Aunt Viester, I spent tons of time at their house. And so I really got comfortable with the notion that it can come from other places, because what I'm needing, if I don't have the fathering, what's missing isn't just the father, it's the fathering. And so it's being able to accept that that may come in different ways from different sources.